Welcome, everybody, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I'm your host, Hayden Lee, and I am joined this week by a very special guest. I got to meet her in person. She spoke at a conference that my team went to a couple of weeks ago. Kristi Holt, founder and CEO of Vibeonix. Kristi, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hey, Hayden, how are you? It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I am great. And I'm even better now that I get to sit down and pick your brain a little bit more. You know, those conferences are awesome because we get to meet and network with some really cool people. But a lot of times, because there are so many people and there's so much packed into just a couple of days, we don't get to have a chance to like really sit down and kind of pick your brain a little bit. And so I'm hoping for the next little while, at least, we get to pick your brain a little bit and learn and maybe have you kind of educate our audience a little bit on what you do and what are some of the important things that are going on with what you guys are doing over at Vibeonix and all things emotional intelligence. So I'm excited to have you and chat with you for a few minutes. Let's start, I think, kind of the first natural place is kind of introduce yourself to our audience a little bit and kind of what is your career background? Who are you? Where have you kind of been for the last, few years, and what's gotten you to the point where you are today?
Okay, that's a great question. First off, I would say I am a wife and a wife of 17 years to my husband, Ryan. We have 4 kids. Their ages are 8 to 16, 2 boys, 2 girls, and which is just a whole lot of things happening at our house all the time. And I've been an entrepreneur since I would claim earlier, but my first business, my real business, like my big girl business that I started when I was 21. And I had my first exit when I was 26. And I thought I was amazing. And I made sure everyone knew how I was amazing. And I put myself on the front of a magazine to tell everybody how amazing. And my second business I started completely failed. And so I feel like by the age of 30, I had a lot of experience in business, starting as foundationally strong enough business to sell it, go through an acquisition, work with a broker and sell a business, and then start another one just outside my non-compete in downtown Salt Lake City, which was a huge opportunity, but also the things I learned in that second business was probably some of the most profound learnings in business. After that, I went and did an e-commerce business. I decided not to do brick and mortar and go online. I had that business for 7 years and I sold that to my partner. And then we started a solar business, which is awesome, and had that for 4 years. And we were able to sell that business. And then we went in to do some just investing in like aluminum anodizing. And I say all this because it's just super weird. I started in the health and beauty and then went into solar and then went into aluminum anodizing. And from there, about 20 years into my entrepreneurship career, I decided to take a job at a wealth management firm. And the purpose of the job was I realized I kept needing a ceiling in business. And I wanted to start thinking about business bigger, different, really understand business beyond what I was able to do. And I wanted to be around people that had done it and were talking about bigger numbers than I had ever even thought about. I probably thought about them, but I didn't know if it was possible at that time.
Yeah.
So when I took this job, it was awesome. I was part of business development. And what was neat about doing that position was I got to meet so many CEOs and entrepreneurs and CEOs that were selling their business because, we wanted to help manage their wealth. And I made it my job, sorry about that, for about 4 years to know every CEO in Utah and surrounding states. And one of my favorite things is that the gentleman that hired me, he and I started 4 different businesses together during that time, which I think when he met business development, he didn't mean go start businesses, but I did not know how not to think that way. And so together we got into a finance company where we also started a fund and we raised money to support the finance company. And then we also had a CBD manufacturing business together. We also had a media business, which was really fun. I got to take these entrepreneur stories and put them in a magazine and tell people about these amazing people doing good in our community. And then we also had Vibeonix, and Vibeonix was the one business that he wasn't really interested in being
Yeah.
a part of originally. And he thought, and quite honestly, it's interesting because he was like, I think that business is dumb. I don't know why you're spending time on it. And also was like, we're not going to fund that business, but I know it's kind of like a side project or something that really was interesting inside of me. And then in 2020, at this time, I was a workaholic completely, and a little bit disconnected from my family, and just really driving hard and making money. And I mean, just a lot of interesting things were happening, trying to keep up with all this stuff that I had going on. And at the end of 2019, I just had this feeling that I got to slow down. This isn't what I say I value. My values were over here, and my actions and behaviors and everything was over here. And I just wanted to realign. So my husband and I sat down and we decided to negotiate out of all of our businesses and quit my day job. Super scary, but there was this internal knowing that this was the right decision for our family. And so I remember talking to my business partner about it in 2019. And by February of 2020, it was my last day at the firm. And to make a long story short, the only business that I wanted to take with me and own and operate the way that I was being called to do it was Vibeonix. So I had this huge mountain of business over here that I negotiated to take my little thing over here. And so my last day was February 28th, 2020.
Jeez.
And COVID hit 2 weeks later.
Yeah, 2 weeks later. Yeah, that's not the greatest timing, unfortunately, Kristi.
I got to tell you, Hayden, I feel like COVID was made for me.
That's awesome. Well, when you're getting into the app and software space, it probably is, right? Like it's a good time.
To leave, I mean, this was like trauma to make that big of a move in your career and to shift so radically in business, and to just have your family trust that this is the right decision, and financially make that decision. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. People were like, what are you doing? You've spent so much time, invested so much time to build this mountain of wealth, so to say. And why are you leaving it? And there was just this internal thing. I know how to do business. I know how to build these businesses. This is not my purpose. I am not meant to be a workaholic mom that can barely keep my eyes open at night and doesn't show up for my husband or my family, and struggling to sometimes even make dinner. Like this isn't the life I dreamed about. And so screw it, I'm just gonna leap and
dive right in.
We did. And what was nice about COVID is the whole world told everybody to do what I just did.
Yeah
Which was like sweet. And so it was a lot of resources became available that wouldn't have been available otherwise to help carry us through that time, because Vibeonix was still in research and development. It wasn't really like making money. And so, we had some nest egg and some preparation that we did, but it ended up being quite a blessing. And Vibeonix has been by far the most purpose-driven company I've ever done. So
I love it. That is, I think, going to be kind of the key piece of obviously what we're going to talk about today, because it's your baby. It's kind of what you've fully transitioned into talking about. But I remember you mentioning that you had started and sold a lot of successful businesses, but I don't think I realized it was as many as you just mentioned, which is really cool. So Katie and I have kind of talked about this term, and I'm sure it's not unique to us. I'm sure people have mentioned this before, but we've called it serial entrepreneurs, which is probably a bad way to phrase it, but it's like somebody that can't help but be an entrepreneur. Like they're going to purchase and sell businesses. They're going to start and sell businesses, and it's just what they do. And they will do that until the end of time. Right. So talk a little bit about, was it obviously your initial one started when you were young, you were 21, and It was like from the get-go. It's not something that you developed later in life, right? Like it's from fresh out of high school, you've developed this. So why is it something that you felt like you just kind of had just always in your personality? Or I guess why is this something that you've always had just a strong desire to want to start and sell or just start businesses? Why is this something that you've always just kind of had in your DNA?
Do you want the deep version of that story, or do you want kind of the like, here's the business answer?
Whatever answer you want to give me, I will take.
Okay, I'll tell you a little bit more about me and where this like comes from. And it's interesting, Hayden. At the beginning, I've started 10 businesses and I've sold 6 successfully, and I wore it like a badge. I actually found that it was probably some childhood trauma that drove me to prove myself over and over and over
I
again.
gotcha.
Now, I have a family of 5 girls, and I'm the middle child. Surprise. And I think it was me proving to my family and myself, and no one was asking me to do this. This was just me proving that I was smart. And I know that sounds maybe silly, but my dad valued the way that you think so much when I was young. At least that was my version of my upbringing, is the you wanted to be smart, and you really wanted to be able to solve problems and communicate effectively and clearly. And he really invested a lot of time in that methodology when we were younger, especially around communication and how we help convey our message or convey what we're saying so your sisters could understand you, so you wouldn't fight. Is really where it came from. But and I grew up a lot around self-development books and self-development. Like my dad, when we would get in trouble when we were young, we didn't get grounded as much as my dad would hand me a book and say, read this, tell me what you learned, and that's for making that choice, is what you have to do. So I read some pretty profound books at a young age, like Think and Grow Rich, by Napoleon Hill, has been like a staple since I was young. And at the time when I read it when I was young, is not even close to what I pick up on it today. Think Big was another one. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People were another one. So I was groomed from a very young age to think and to analyze myself and to think big and to have big goals and aspirations and dreams. So to me, I was also taught, traditional ways of accumulating wealth, which was by Robert Kiyosaki's book. In fact, I got to spend a day with him, and I remember thinking that was the most incredible day of my life.
That's cool.
Delayed gratification and understanding wealth in a different way and understanding business. And so I think for me, I was probably programmed at a young age that this entrepreneurship life is the life I was going to do. So I was always thinking about how to solve a problem and make money doing it. That's just, when I was 7, not to go back to when I was 7, and the story is better with my mom, but she says that like summer started, and one day a bunch of moms started dropping off their kids at our house. And she was like, what is going on? I'm like, Mom, I started a school, and I had taken flyers, and at 7 years old, and I was charging 50 cents.
That's incredible.
For these kids to come over. And I had made little desks, and I went and bought chalk and was writing on a white wall. And I was teaching them ABCs and 1, 2, 3. And my mom encouraged it and ended up letting me do it every summer, where I could teach some kids and have them come over. So I think I was just always encouraged from a very young age to think about business differently and be an entrepreneur. I will say the trauma would be, I think I got addicted to starting the business and the excitement of it. And, when there's a cycle in business, and that cycle of excitement, you almost have like unconscious knowing about what the business is actually about or what it's going to be able to do. And you get all this excitement, you start to ramp up in business, get everything going. And then you get very aware of the problems or the things that aren't going well, and like the reality of how hard it is. And that's when most people quit.
Yeah.
And that's when I would sell. And so knowing this about me, I'm like, can I stay in it this time and go and ride this wave all the way through? And it would take a completely different person to run $100 million business or $1 billion business than a person that knew how to run a couple 100,000 or a couple $1 million business.
Right.
And so my challenge to me with Vibeonix has been, can I be the leader of $100 million business? Can I stretch myself to become that? And it has been a very challenging thing to figure out, but I knew how to do this. So this was really getting me beyond myself. And I think it was just not willing to be uncomfortable until this time of my life where I'm like, I got to let some stuff go. I got to heal
Yeah.
some things. I got to come into some radical self-awareness. I got to really choose who I interact with and who I learn from and who I'm with on a daily basis so I can be the best version of me to take this all the way through.
I love it. That's awesome. And that's an awesome story, I think, to kind of describe, because I'm fascinated by, like, I maybe have some of those small business or, entrepreneurial mindset pieces in myself, but I just talking to people like yourself that have just started businesses their whole lives up, and, even clear up to you were 7 years old, doing stuff like this. Like, I love it. And I love that you're also self-aware enough to know, oh, maybe I really like starting the businesses, but I'm not as good as the management and the data. So what can I do to develop that? And how do I surround myself with people to make myself better at that? And I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs miss, that they think because they've made this leap and started the business that they're above it all, that they can do no wrong, that, oh, I've come up with this great idea and I've started this business. That's all I needed to do. Everyone's just going to come want to buy my product or buy my service or whatever it is. Right. And I think there's layers to that where you've got to be self-aware enough to know, okay, I might have come up with this idea or I might have started this business, but I've got to start looking for additional resources, either surrounding myself with different people or educating myself, maybe networking in different groups. Like there's some things that I need to do to better myself so that I can actually grow this business. And I love that. I think that whole conversation is crucially important. And I think it leads right into what you're doing now with Vibeonix, with this whole conversation of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is something that we've put a big emphasis on here at Spot On Solutions, and something that we're trying to do a better job of maybe elevating our team's emotional intelligence. Obviously, it's a huge piece of Vibeonix and what you guys are doing there, but talk to us a little bit about, why are you so passionate about emotional intelligence and EQ, and what is that stuff? And yeah, why are you so passionate about it?
Well, I think it goes kind of, and thank you, that's a really good question. It really goes on that journey I just told you about. I
Yeah.
think when you start a business and sell a business, that's a version of you. When you fail a business, I think when I'm, learning that I am not my business and that fear of failure coming into fruition at such a young age was pretty profound in my life. And I think I avoided really understanding that until later because it was really painful. And I think going back to what we were saying, if you really want to scale where you are like a high performer or a peak performance person, and you want to live and enjoy life at the highest levels and experience the things that you want to experience, you've got to learn how to experience yourself fully. And you can't experience a life out here fully if you're not willing to experience inside fully. And so for me, I think I was always like a very optimistic human being. Like I was born like, oh, everything's rose-colored glasses. In fact, I remember when I was little and even into my adulthood, my sisters would tell me, Kristi, that's not reality. Or you are rainbows and unicorns. You just are making up this view of life and that's not even real. But it was real to me.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I started imagining like, why does not everybody open to this idea that they can choose how they think and feel? And am I accountable for how I think and feel? but I didn't ask those questions until in my 30s. So, I knew how to do business. I knew how to be successful, but I don't think I was really living in those moments of success. I wasn't celebrating. I always thought I could do better. So I was constantly pushing and moving and performing, but I wasn't really like experiencing and living in my life. And it wasn't until a really profound personal experience I had in my 30s. At the time I looked at it outside of me, which was my husband was struggling with deep depression. And I'm grateful so much for this experience because it really asked me to go inside. And at first, when I looked at him, I was like, what is this? How can we solve this? And we went down a lot of traditional methods of understanding depression and understanding anxiety and understanding addiction and understanding some of these real mainstream things that were happening. And the protocol that we got was take a pill. And just take a pill and it's going to be okay. And as long as, maybe he needs to talk through some stuff. And meanwhile, he's having this experience and I'm having my own experience of the effect of some of this in my life. And it was starting to pull up a lot of my own stuff. So, personally in our 30s, we went through traditional methodologies of depression and anxiety and addiction, and understanding why people behave the way that they behave. Now, this goes back to my first business. I would sit with women and do their pedicures and their facials, and I loved hearing their stories, and I loved hearing like why they do what they do and how they feel. So this has always been, that personal development side of me has always been pretty strong. So fast forward into my 30s and going into, if traditional methodologies aren't actually truly helping him be the best version of him and me be the best version of me, what else is there? Is there something inside of me that I can understand to help choose a different outcome? And that's when we started asking these questions. And I tell you this because this is the deep-rooted self part of me that really has continued to evolve Vibeonix. Because what the questions I started asking is, what do I need to know about myself so I can show up differently as a wife, as a mother, as a supporter, as a business owner, to go from here to here? The reality that I'm in and the life I'm living to the one I actually desire and want. What is the gap and how do I get there? And I started asking those questions that led me to understand more about myself, that led me to all these different studies and research to find how important emotion was. And that sounds kind of silly that like emotion is the answer. It's not the answer, but it's the awareness that gets us to our answer. And so in my own personal experience, we started exploring, well, I'll just tell you, let me personalize this even further. Does this sound too personal? Because I feel like when we talk about my business, I don't know how to not make it personal because it's what gets me up every day.
Well, and yeah, sorry, but like to your point, like emotional intelligence is extremely personal. And I think it requires like an internal look at yourself to be like, how can I be I think, granted, maybe I'm taking this a little too far, but I feel like if you want to be a better person, you have to increase your emotional intelligence. And so like it requires like some deeply personal looks at yourself, and maybe look at events, past events with family members or whatever, to be like, okay, how can I be better? And one of the ways I'm going to try and be better is to elevate my emotional intelligence. Sorry, continue. I wanted to kind of throw that
right.
in.
And the journey that my husband and I went on, number one, the interesting thing in hindsight is it was always about me, my own journey. But for the first part of it, I thought it was about him. And that's interesting now because I'm like, oh, it was about me the whole time. But what was really cool when we started understanding emotions is how do we take something we feel and know more about it so we can make better decisions. And in that journey, I assumed a lot of emotion. And so this is the funny story that Vibeonix ended up helping clear up a huge assumption in my life. So I assumed that my husband was angry. And I had all the stories and all the proof that he was angry and that was the problem. Okay. And that really is how I was living life. He's angry, and that's the problem. That's why he numbs. That's why he self-medicates. That's why he's depressed. Like, he's just angry. And fast forward out to like where we started just testing our technologies. We took all this research and development, and now we got it into voice, and like we could objectively look at emotion. I remember doing mine and he did his, and my anger was like 89%.
And what
And
was
guess who
his?
didn't have any anger? Like, my husband's anger was like 10%.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. It's just
And
different
I
people.
was
Yeah.
living this whole reality, and I had all the stories
And
and
you're like,
all
oh, that technology's broken. Oh, we didn't do this right. Yeah.
something is wrong, but
Yeah.
I know how it was created, so I knew it was right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the only thing what's the gap between my observation of life and my story and this new objective view? And it was like the most aha moment. I was like, okay, I'm projecting my anger and saying it was him,
Yeah.
but it's always mine. Because if I'm sitting in anger, I'm creating that reality.
Yeah. Totally.
That's huge, right? So then, and I looked at his, I was like, well, what is your scores? And his was when we look at the negative energies, it was confusion. So
Mm.
think about anyone that you know that might be suffering from levels of depression or sadness, or when they're calling it something it isn't, and then trying to solve for something it actually isn't, but just the story that we're believing. So that is pretty profound. I know we just went pretty deep into my own methodology of why I think emotional intelligence matters, is when we become more aware of the real emotion that's driving our thinking and our feeling and our actions, then we can make a different choice.
Yeah.
But if we don't think it's our responsibility and we can't take accountability for how we feel, then we believe we are a victim to not only ourselves, but everyone else.
Yeah.
So this was the most profound thing that we learned early on. And this is why we do what we do, is because if we can bring radical awareness and bring a point of objective truth that can be perceived differently, then we can have real change. And so at the core, that's how we got here about why. I mean, because Vibeonix had its difficulties. We were super early in the market where people were like, why are you talking about emotion?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Who
this is
cares? Oh, I
pre-pandemic.
don't want to learn about my emotions. What are we talking about? Yeah.
Everyone's like, they don't even matter. Like, Kristi, what a waste of time. Why are you looking at this? And then too, what else is funny is I remember hearing the term AI, and I was like, artificial intelligence. Okay, well, let me think through that. And I was like, so that's like objectively learning something about something that it's hard to find that a point in it, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, so if we have a ton of data and we can objectively look at it, and an algorithm can find it with all this data that our mind can't necessarily, or isn't ready, or it probably is, but we're not hearing it, that it's constructing all this data, that it can tell me something that's actually true. Now I have something that I can, or that's objective. Now I have something where I can ask myself different questions and get a different result.
Oh, yeah.
Before, I'm just like doing the same thing and hoping it changes, versus, ooh, I'm gonna bring in this new data point from these thousands of data points to one where I can start to change my life. So I was like, AI and EI, there's the magic secret. There's the magic sauce. And nobody would have invested it. Everyone thought I was crazy. Emotions don't matter, and we don't even know what AI is.
And then COVID happened, and now everyone's like, hey, we should learn more about this stuff. Yeah.
Right. And here we are ready to say, because Hayden, do you want to know what the hardest part about that early experience was? Just the confusion. Like, I am a good person. I make good choices. I believe I'm doing the right thing, and my life still feels chaotic. So why? And what can I change? And what can I do differently? I'm eating better. I'm going to the gym, but I still don't feel good. Like, what
Right.
is this? And so what we've done is taken all of this data and made it so clear that a third grader can understand this. but we've made it to take something so confusing and make it, here's some clear data points to ask yourself some better questions so you can have a different outcome.
The Success Elevated podcast is brought to you by SOS Navigator. SOS Navigator is an on-demand training platform geared towards marketing, personal development, and business growth. We understand that as a business owner in the service industry, you wear a million hats. Let SOS Navigator be a simple and cost-effective way for you to continue to grow your business. Click the link in the show notes below and use code SOS Podcast to get 10% off your next on-demand training course.
So I love that conversation. Obviously shows like why you're so passionate about it. You know, this conversation with emotional intelligence and the conversations that we've had here within our team, and we've done some trainings on it, and you know, we've read some books and we've talked about it a bunch. One thing that I feel like, and you can, and I want you to correct me, because I've felt like in the past that emotional intelligence and trying to maybe look outside of ourselves and how can I help others, I feel like sometimes, granted, again, this is in the past, I felt like those two things are kind of at odds with each other, where it's like, I want to increase my emotional intelligence. I want to be better in tune with my emotions and know how to react to certain situations and stuff. To past Hayden, I should say, feels like that was really like me centered. Like, what's going on with me? How do I solve me? I need to make myself better. When I feel like the world would be a better place if we were focused more on others and like, how can I help others? And how do I react better to others and work well with my team and treat my spouse better? You know, all of this stuff. But I feel like recently, as I've learned more about emotional intelligence, and I would love your thoughts on this, those two things aren't at odds with each other. That like, I can still work on myself and help myself learn more about my emotions and be a better person to others. Does that make sense? I don't know if there's a way to connect those two.
We could have so much fun with this conversation.
Okay.
And if it's okay, I'm going to tell you, go back to a core belief that I was taught as a child.
Okay.
If you want to feel better, help someone else.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Pretty cool. Like, oh, go serve.
Yeah, totally.
So here's how I look at it. When I was young, I was like, oh, okay, we'll go serve. So let me give you an example. I want to feel better, so I'm going to go make my neighbor cookies.
Yeah.
Simple, right? I'm going to go serve and make their day better. But then, so I go give them the cookies, and my neighbor didn't say thank you. Well, I needed that thank you. That's why I did it. Why didn't you say thank you? So when we serve at a place that we're not part of the equation, when we serve with awareness, I'm making you cookies so I feel better. There's no manipulation. There's no expectation. There's nothing. It's whether or not you say thank you, whether or not you make them back, whether or not you're aware of me or not. It takes all of that out of the equation because I did it for me.
Yeah.
Now, that is not how we were taught about service. I'm doing it for you. So I think when we become more emotionally aware, we're saying we own that I do things so I feel better because I'm in charge of the way I feel. Now we have accountability. Yeah. Then when we do good works, we can stay in integrity.
Yeah. And
I think to me, it's changing the whole way, going back to some other beliefs of you can't give what you don't have. You know, Wayne Dyer gives this really cool example about a woman that has lemons and he keeps asking for orange juice. And she's like, well, we don't have orange juice and we only have lemons. And he's like, but I want orange juice. You can't give something you don't have. So if you don't have love in your heart, you can't give love to someone else because you don't have it. If you don't have kindness in your being, you can't give kindness. And by the way, where manipulation feels like if I'm saying that I love you, but I can't feel that energetic feeling isn't being reciprocated. It actually doesn't feel real. So words are saying something different than what we're actually feeling. So emotional intelligence is bringing it back into harmony of being authentic and true and being in integrity with yourself and how you feel. So when you do those things or when your actions, it feels different.
Yeah. I love that.
So, and that's where we kind of take it a little step further. Like every emotion has an energy. And that's actually how we measure it, is through the frequency. So the frequency holds the information of the energy that we can measure. So for example, Hayden, I know you've probably done this. When you walk home, or when you get home at night and you open up the door, and you walk in the door, you can feel your wife's energy. You're married, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You can feel the vibe of the home without anyone saying anything. Yes?
Yeah, for sure.
You can actually know if your wife had a good day or a bad day just walking in the door. Or you could have actually even picked up on it before you even got there. That's how energy works. But so when you walk in the door and you can feel that, now if you're aware of it, that feeling, because you're tapped into feeling your own emotion, you can feel that. Now you can come with empathy and real compassion because you're sensitive to what you're sensing.
Right. Totally.
But if you don't have emotional awareness, or you're not emotionally intelligent, A, you miss the cue. You didn't even feel it. B, you just start thinking something versus connecting in the feeling of it.
Yeah.
So then you're like, why are you mad? I'm not mad. I'm not mad. Okay, well, did you have a bad day? Well, kind of, but you're not coming at it from an empathetic place.
No.
So you're just like, you're in friction, right? So the whole goal of emotional intelligence is to be self-aware. Number one, if you are not aware of what you hold, you're not aware of the damage or the beauty it's creating. Period. So you got to be self-aware. Then you got to be good at managing. So that management is, am I aware of the emotion and energy I hold? And am I managing it, or is it chaotic? And I know a lot of us know what the difference is. When you're around some people, you're like, God, you just feel good. It doesn't mean they're not having emotion. It just means they're really good at managing that energy around them and inside them, right? And then expressing. So when it moves in a healthy way. So can I express how I'm feeling? Can I express what I'm thinking? Can I express in a healthy way? And then last but not least, empathy. And the reason that we and Dr. Goldman brings up empathy is empathy for yourself first, so you can truly give empathy to others. And that's the biggest shift that I think our world needs to understand, is like, if you can't give it to yourself, you're not actually giving it to others.
Nope.
So if you can't love yourself, you're not actually loving others. If you're not kind to yourself, you can't actually be kind. It feels like you're being nice, not kind.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There's a difference there. There totally is.
Yeah. And so what we teach, and we can quantify each of those. So for example, yesterday I checked in, my self-awareness was at a 10 out of 100. And by the way, emotional intelligence, you don't just arrive. I could tell you a funny story. Well, I don't know if we have time, Hayden, but
You're good. You're good. Go for it.
Okay. So we just launched 90 videos in our app, and it took me years to do this because I was so worried about me feeling like I knew something, or I don't know. It was a whole thing I had to get through to put 90 videos of my face out there. So we had just put them in the app to help people understand and educate about emotion, emotional intelligence, the 4 key areas and the 4 pillars, and then how to have a healthier relationship with your emotion, how to feel safe in emotion, how to identify emotion, like so many fun topics. It was really scary to put me personally in our technology. It was really, really scary. And I can tell you, it was fear of loss of identity. My fear of loss of identity was out of control. And I was aware of it because my little app showed me.
Right.
So anyway, we launch all these videos, and I'm going up to speak at this thing. I had to leave my house at 4 o'clock in the morning to drive up to this event. While I'm driving up there, my development team lets me know that the server crashed.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? And I'm driving, I'm going to be late, and they need me to go and test some things and do some things. Like, they need me to go and okay this person talking to this person, because we keep a lot of our stuff separated. This person talking to this person, we need to have all this. Anyway, so I was feeling unimaginable emotion and absolutely out of control. And I pulled over to the side of the road, and I just burst into tears. And I was like, I was so I didn't know what else to do for a minute. And I needed to pull my crap together so I could get on the phone with our dev team and get this solved. So they said, we just need you to test the app right now if we think we fixed it. I'm like, I cannot test it. They're going to know it's me. Like, I was having all this
Right.
stuff. I got the lowest score we'd ever recorded in emotional intelligence.
You were just, it was a stressful situation. Okay.
I got a 13. So here's what I'm here to tell you. If you're emotionally intelligent, you are going to be emotional.
Yeah.
Even think about that. If you aren't feeling your emotion, there's nothing to be smart about, which means like you're not actually in being emotional. You're not in your full energetic self of living and experiencing life. You're disassociated with your own emotion. That is not emotional intelligence. And so many people think, oh, I'm so cool, calm, and collected. Be caution of the person that says that, because their like energy is going to explode somewhere. It's the person that can feel emotion and know what to do with it. So emotionally intelligent people are going to be emotional. So as we bring emotional intelligence into the workplace, we are opening ourselves up to bring the human experience into the workplace. That is a big deal. So how do we do that? Because guess what happens when we bring emotionally intelligent people to work? Emotions are going to be present.
Yeah, totally.
And so that's the tools, and that's what we want to understand when we start bringing it into the workplace. It's really understanding we're welcoming all of you.
Yeah.
We're welcoming your human self to the workplace. And now we got to have the tools and the resources if someone's having an emotional response to life.
Yeah, I love it. Well, and this conversation, I think, leads perfectly in. And so I'm going to follow up to what you're saying. A business, what does it do for a business or a business owner? What can it do for them when they start allowing some of this stuff to come into the workplace, when they're allowing people to have high emotional intelligence? And so there's going to be emotions in the workplace. What can it do for the workplace? Is it going to help the business grow? Is it going to hurt? Like, what does it do for a business when a business owner or a manager or a general, whatever, starts allowing some of this stuff to take place in the workplace?
This is such a good question, because I think this is what the world's calling for. Okay. Because when we get so techie and disassociated with work, what happens? People leave. People don't feel fulfilled. They don't feel like they're doing anything that matters.
Right.
So when you start bringing emotionally intelligent people to work for you, you are going to build connection and engagement. The reason why is emotion connects. If we run Oz robots, AKA AI, that is so disconnecting, right? And we are not meant to be disconnected from ourselves. So we're not meant to just compartmentalize and come to work and be a robot. And I think the world is saying, we've tried that for 100 years and people are exhausted. People are burning out and people are leaving and wanting to work in purpose and job hunting or job hopping, because they don't feel fulfilled, they don't feel connected, and they don't feel valued. So when we bring emotional intelligence into the workplace, people will have connection, because the human connection comes through emotion. Hey, and compassion and understanding and gratitude, right? So when we bring that in, number one, we're going to get connection. Number two, we're going to get higher employee engagement, because employees are feeling seen and heard and valued for who they are, not just the task that they perform. Because as we know, AI can most likely perform that task. Right. So they need to be valued in who they are. And that's why we have to have emotionally intelligent leaders that can bring that value to the forefront. They're also going to make better decisions. Because if you're saying that we can bring our whole self, then I'm not constantly trying to not be myself. And when I'm trying to not be myself, I'm not making the best educated decisions.
Right.
Right. So we make better decisions, and we're also more productive. Because when I get to just be myself and I get to come to work and I'm value seen and engaged, I'm part of a team. I want to like drive this forward. I feel motivated. I feel connected. Like, so people are more productive. And the reason I think we haven't done this fully yet is we just don't understand emotion enough to have the tools and resources to have that be present in the workplace. And I know, like, and I think this whole thing with like women having more seniority or having part of the leadership team, I think because women have always been given permission to have emotion, but then it's always been abused. Like,
Right.
oh, she's that's her time of the month, or she's, you know, she gets labeled these emotional things because women tend to have more emotion, or they're more comfortable in emotion. So I think we got to clear up some of the biases with women being too emotional. So therefore emotionally women are not healthy or bad for the environment at work. That's got to go. Men have got to be able to express that they're not robots,
Yeah.
and that they're actually human beings that are feeling something and have a safe place to say, hey, I don't know the answer, and that's okay. Or I'm feeling a little nervous or scared, and that's okay. So I think that's the benefits of bringing emotional intelligence to the workplace. And I think the biggest opportunity is tools and resources that are allowing us to do that in a more simple way. But I'm not a fortune teller, but kind of, maybe. No, just kidding. I will say as AI grows, and it can do a lot of our tasks, which is how we feel valued at work, our emotional intelligence has got to grow at rapid pace along with it, so we can understand our value and create from that space, and not lose this game, or think that we're losing this game of AI versus people. Right. So I think
Yeah.
our world is calling for us as AI is growing to do your task. Then what's my value? My value is connections. My value is people. And so
Yeah.
we got to be really, really good at connecting with ourselves so we can connect truly with others.
Well, and again, going back to what you just said, the way you do that is we've got to find some tools and resources to help us elevate our emotional intelligence. And one of those tools and resources right now is what you guys are doing over at Vibeonix. So this is we've talked about all of these awesome things, and you've obviously mentioned some things about Vibeonix and what it does for you, but tell our audience a little bit. We've talked about why it's important, why emotional intelligence is important, what it does for you in the workplace. Now they need some tools and resources. What can Vibeonix do for people in the day-to-day business operations? What can it do for them?
Okay, thank you so much for asking this question. And I want to tell you, Vibeonix is going through some changes, so I feel like I'm going to say we have a Powered by Vibeonix, and that's been really cool because we can power other people's technologies and modalities, because there's so many ways to unpack this idea of our thinking and our feeling and our actions, right? So we have a Powered by Vibeonix through an API, which means our core technology can be available in other people's technologies.
Wow.
Which is really
I love
cool.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, so we can amplify and innovate current technologies that want to look at the ability to measure emotion and quantify emotion, including those 4 key areas of self-awareness. And our goal is, as Vibeonix, is to continue to build our algorithm and data points that would be effective and efficient in the workplace and beyond. So education, healthcare, and workplace is our main focus today. And so going back to your question, we also built a product that has an app and a platform. And the user app is available for employees to work on themselves and be aware of themselves and start to become radically aware of their emotional states. So they can take accountability in conversations and how they show up for work. Then we have a platform that shows the aggregate data of the team. So you can say, wow, you know, our sales team is, these emotions are present, or our front end or our back end, maybe in manufacturing, or people work from home, or people work from the office. So you can kind of keep a tab on it, but you can also have deeper conversation around it. So we have a aggregate score for each team. And then you can also just open up, like, let's take it down a layer deeper, and let's look at who's the most motivated, or who's like, we can start to see if we just launched a new product and confusion skyrockets, we got to do a better job in our training. So we got to set up a safe place for people to come and ask more questions so we can reduce the confusion rate, which is really cool. Yeah. Or you can see, like, our sales team is always motivated, but they're highly stressed. So what can we do to help mitigate that stress so they're staying productive? Because highly stressed people start to lose their productivity, right? So if we see stress skyrocketing, we can actually be more proactive in solving these problems versus reactive when it gets to the numbers or the productivity or sales calls went down or whatever it is. So
Right.
our thing is you work on yourself, because remember we say it's with you first. And then you also get to work on and be a part of the team and proactively approach these emotional responses to things that we're doing in the business.
Oh, so cool. So cool. I had no idea that the integration stuff was possible. I think that makes it so easy on a company-wide level to really start getting some of this data to know as a business owner, okay, how am I feeling? What can I do to increase my emotional intelligence? And then I can look at my teams and say, okay, yeah, like you're saying, preemptively maybe solve a problem or solve an issue that could arise before it actually happens, right? Because you can start seeing, oh man, feels like my sales team's a little disconnected, or the remote team's a little disconnected from the in-office team. So like, what can we do to help that or correct that before it becomes a major issue? And I love the idea that it can just fully integrate into your business, and it's not something that you necessarily have to like schedule a training or a meeting on, right? Like it's just kind of always, we can always be learning and developing in the background, which is just so cool. If people want to learn more about this, if people want to spend some time and maybe look at some options to integrate into their business, where do they got to go to check you guys out?
So right now, go to Vibeonix.com. You
Love
can schedule a demo, or you can also start a 14-day trial. Just
it.
make
Cool.
sure that you follow. It's pretty innovative. If you start a 14-day trial for your business, the first thing that you're going to want to do is invite your employees, because otherwise you're not going to be able to experience anything. And remember, as an employee, you completely control any data that your manager would see. If you turn off your data, they can't see any personalized stuff about you. You're be part of the aggregate for the team, but that's it. So some people
Gotcha.
ask that question, like, maybe I don't want my manager to know if I'm high in fear today,
Right.
right? No problem. Just keep it on off, and it comes off. You can turn it on if you like, but otherwise you just turn it off. And now you're just part of your team data. You'll know where your numbers are in the team and then ask your team to support you. So make sure you invite your users and utilize that 14-day, and make sure once they're invited, they just have to accept the invitation, download the app, and start checking in.
Love it. Love it. Vibeonix.com. We'll make sure to have this linked in the description below. But
Awesome.
Kristi, thank you seriously so much for our conversation today. We ask to close out every episode. We ask all of our guests the same kind of 3 questions, and you've provided so much awesome information today. I want to pick your brain just for a few more minutes here, if you're cool with that. First question I always ask: favorite book or podcast that you're reading or listening to right now, or that you've read recently?
I am actually reading, I just got asked to read along with my team, the book called Traction. I'd
Okay.
like to tell you that I know what it is, but I'm just starting it. That was recommended by a guy on our executive team, so we're going to read it together. One of my favorite business books is Predictable Success, how to lead a business through the 4 pillars and make sure that your executive team holds these characteristics on your decision making. And then I would say, I'll just show you. This one is my personal read right now, and it's called Is the Secret by Neville Goddard. He wrote this in 1944, and
Wow.
if you like Napoleon Hill, stuff like that, you will love Neville Goddard. Feeling is the Secret.
That's such a great, that's probably, no, I don't want to say probably, that's definitely the oldest book that has been recommended on the podcast. Every book that we get recommended, and they've all been awesome, are all a lot of like self-help and business development. And that is something, and they're generally written within the last 25 or 30 years, but that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, he's got a whole series of 14 books. I will tell you, like, again, I love Napoleon Hill. So going back to like 1938, 1944, what I love about writing then versus now is he just gets so in the core of truth where you're just like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. But not it's really good. If you like that, I would
Awesome.
absolutely go back to that. And it's funny because It's all 10 books are by a modern master. And here
Wow.
it was in 1944.
That's cool. Love it. That's a great recommendation. Second question. I'm sure you wear a lot of hats. You're chasing your kids around throughout the day and also trying to run a very successful business. How do you relax at the end of a long day? What do you do to recharge your batteries?
Do you know what's interesting? I breathe.
Okay. Love it. No, that's great.
I mean,
like
I just take
meditation or,
moments.
yeah.
I just take moments throughout the day, and then that's one thing. But I would say my biggest shift in life has been be present where you are.
Mm,
Like I'm present on this podcast. I'm not thinking about all the things I need to get done. When I'm with my 8-year-old, I'm just listening to a story, being present with my 8-year-old, not thinking about what my 16-year-old's doing. When I'm with my husband, I'm just present with my husband. So my goal in life is to just be present where I am.
Love it. We were doing some of these emotional intelligence trainings. One of the things that the person that was presenting to us talked about was, practicing mindfulness. And I think that's kind of the same thing, right? Like be in the moment. And that's something that I always thought was that didn't make sense to me for meditation. I was like, I'm just going to lay on the ground and like fall asleep but that's not what meditation or like breathing, like you're talking about, is like, you're going to be in the moment. You're going to be focusing on what you're doing in that moment. Yeah. Talking to your kid. I would even
take it like be in your body.
Yeah.
Because if your mind is in your body, you're like experiencing the now.
Yeah. That's awesome. Last question, and then I'll quit bugging you today.
Oh, you're great.
You've been awesome, Kristi. And this has been, like I said, a fantastic podcast. But if you could rewind to the beginning of your career, maybe it's when you were 21 starting your first business, or technically 7 when you were starting your business, teaching kids. But if you could rewind to the beginning of it all and tell younger Kristi one thing, what would that one thing be?
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't mean to. Just trust yourself. Like, just trust yourself. Like, the only times when it got really, really, really hard is when I forgot to trust myself. And myself means I'm in knowing of who I am and my maker. Yeah. And that to me is, if I'm aligned with that, I can trust anything. Every decision is going to be okay.
It's awesome. It's interesting that you say that, because a lot of the recommendation, or a lot of the people that come on and are asked that question, almost, I don't want to say all of them, but I would say a significant majority of them say something very similar to that, where it's like, if I could rewind at the beginning of all, I would tell myself, like, don't stress about it. Don't worry. Like, trust myself that everything's going to be okay. Like that's such a huge piece to it that I think even, and I haven't necessarily started any businesses, but if I could go back and tell younger myself one thing, it would be something similar. Like, it's all going to be all right. Like, don't let the day-to-day craziness of the world, get you down. And trust that everything's going to be okay.
There's this really cool quote that says, if you felt fully supported, what would you do?
Wow.
And to me, that is like, the only way to feel fully supported is here.
Yeah.
Because out here, you can't control all that. Like, it's just someone else's version of the truth or the story, or you're just viewing life. But if you trust here, then you're going to see life differently. And you're also just going to be feeling that you've got you and you're fully supported. And again, I'm a very spiritual person. So I feel like if I trust me, what I mean by that is I trust the ever evolving eternal me.
Yeah.
Which is connected to that source that knows everything beyond what I can see.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Great. That's a great way to wrap up a podcast on emotional intelligence and all things that we're trying to do to maybe elevate that for everybody. But Kristi, seriously, thank you so much for coming on. This was awesome. It was awesome to have you. And I think we're going to have you on again in the future. Talk a little bit more about Vibeonix, or anything new that you're learning, or maybe some new updates that I'm sure you guys are going to continue to develop and grow as a business. And anyways, just thank you again for coming on.
Thank you so much, Hayden. We'll see you next time.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube or any other major podcast platform to listen to more episodes. We are proudly brought to you by Spot On Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you grow your business, please check us out at spotonsolutions.com.